Welcome to 80s horror stories, where the past does not rest, and some things never stop watching. On March 14, 1971, a desk sergeant at the Philadelphia Police Department's 9th District received a piece of mail that he almost threw away. The envelope was old. Not old in the way that mail gets old sitting in a pile for a week. Old in the way that paper gets when it has been somewhere dark and still for a very long time. The corners had softened. The ink on the address had faded to the color of old tea. The postmark, still partially legible under a magnifying glass, read Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. October 1943. 28 years. The letter had taken 28 years to arrive. The sergeant, a man named Daniel Morrow who had been on the force for 19 years and thought he had seen everything, almost set it aside for the curiosity pile. Old mail arrived at police stations occasionally. Mis-sorted packages. Letters routed wrong. It happened. He was about to put it in the drawer where such things went to be forgotten when he noticed the return address. It was a street in the Fishtown neighborhood of Philadelphia. And beside it, written in the same faded ink, a name. Elanor Vos. Morrow knew that name. He had been a rookie in 1943. He had not worked the case himself, but he remembered it the way you remember things that leave a mark on a precinct. Elanor Vos had disappeared in October of 1943. She was 31 years old, a seamstress, a widow, a mother of one daughter. She had been reported missing on October 19. Her body had never been found. The case had gone cold within a year and stayed cold for 28 years, and now Elanor Vos had written him a letter. Morrow opened it carefully, aware without being able to say why that this moment required care. Inside were 3 pages of handwriting, neat and controlled in the way that women of that era were taught to write. The date at the top was October 17, 1943, 2 days before she was reported missing. And the first line read, "By the time anyone reads this, I will already be dead. I know who is going to kill me. I know when. And I know that if I go to the police now, nothing will happen in time. So I am writing this down so that someone, someday, will know the truth." Morrow sat down. He read all 3 pages without moving. Then he picked up his telephone and called his lieutenant. And the case of Elanor Vos, cold for 28 years, reopened that afternoon. What they found when they followed the letter's instructions would close a case. But it would open questions that have never been answered. Questions about how the letter survived. Questions about where it had been. Questions about why, of all the desks in all the police stations in Philadelphia, it arrived on the desk of the one man who recognized the name. Here is what we know. Here is what the record shows. And here is what the record cannot explain. Elanor Ruth Vos was born on June 3, 1912, in the Kensington neighborhood of Philadelphia, the 3rd child of a Polish immigrant family named Kowalczyk. Her father worked the textile mills. Her mother took in laundry. Elanor left school at 14 to work, the way children of that neighborhood and that era left school, not as a failure but as a contribution. By 16 she was working in a garment factory on Girard Avenue. By 21 she had married a man named Thomas Vos, a dock worker, steady and quiet, who died of pneumonia in the winter of 1938 and left Elanor a widow at 26 with a 5-year-old daughter named Ruth. Neighbors who were interviewed in 1971, when the case reopened, described Elanor consistently. Careful, private. Intelligent in the way that people are intelligent when they have had to solve real problems their whole lives rather than academic ones. She kept her apartment clean. She paid her bills. She went to Mass on Sundays. She did not complain and she did not ask for help, and she was, by every account, the kind of woman who disappears from history because she did not do anything that history noticed. Until October of 1943. What changed in October of 1943 is documented, partially. Elanor had been working for 2 years as a seamstress for a tailoring shop on Frankfurt Avenue owned by a man named Gerald Marsh. Marsh was 44, married, the son of a reasonably prominent Philadelphia family with connections in city government. He had inherited the shop from his father and expanded it. He had a good reputation professionally. Personally, according to the 1971 interviews, his reputation was more complicated. 2 of Eleanor's former co-workers, both still living when the case reopened, told investigators that Marsh had been pursuing Elanor for most of the 2 years she worked for him. Not overtly. Not in ways that were actionable in 1943, which was a different era with different standards about what men in positions of authority were permitted to do. But persistently. And that Elanor had, in their words, handled it, which meant she had declined, deflected, and maintained a professional distance that was costing her something because Marsh was not a man who received deflection gracefully. In September of 1943, according to one of the co-workers, something changed. Elanor came to work different, tighter, more careful with her words. She had seen something, the co-worker believed, or learned something, that had shifted the situation from uncomfortable to dangerous. The co-worker did not know what it was. Elanor had not said. She had only said, once, at the end of a shift, that she needed to be smart about something and that being smart was going to take a little time. She had 6 weeks. Then she was gone. The letter that arrived at the 9th District on March 14, 1971 was 3 pages long, written on standard writing paper of the kind sold at any 5-dime in 1943. Elanor Vos had written it on October 17, a Friday, 2 days before she was reported missing, in her apartment at 412, Belgrade Street in Fishtown. The letter began with the line Morrow had already read. "By the time anyone reads this, I will already be dead." It then proceeded, with a clarity and a calmness that the detectives who read it in 1971 found more disturbing than hysteria would have been, to lay out exactly what Elanor believed was going to happen to her and why. She wrote that Gerald Marsh had, on the night of September 28, 1943, asked her to stay late at the shop to finish an alteration for a city councilman whose name she included in the letter. She had stayed. Marsh had brought her to his office at the back of the shop on the pretense of discussing the alteration. In the office, Elanor had witnessed something she was not supposed to witness. She wrote that Marsh had received a man she did not know, that she had seen this man hand Marsh an envelope, that she had seen Marsh open it, and that what was inside had been enough for Elanor to understand that Marsh was involved in something that involved city money and city officials, and that understanding had made her, in Marsh's eyes, a problem. She wrote that Marsh had not threatened her directly. He was too careful for direct threats. But in the 3 weeks between September 28 and October 17, small things had happened. Her cat had been found dead on her doorstep. A man she did not know had followed her from the trolley stop 2 separate times. Her landlord, who had never shown any interest in her lease before, had suddenly told her that her tenancy might need to be reconsidered. These were not accidents, and Elanor Vos was not a woman who believed in accidents when they came in clusters. She wrote that she had considered going to the police. She wrote this clearly and without apology. "I have not gone because I do not believe going will help me. I believe that the people Gerald Marsh is connected to include people in positions where a woman like me does not receive protection. I am not accusing any specific officer of anything. I am saying that I know how this city works, and I know what a seamstress from Fishtown is worth when she is standing between a man like Gerald Marsh and his safety." She then wrote what she knew. All of it. The name of the councilman. The date of the exchange. The amount she had seen written on a document inside the envelope, which was $8,000, a significant sum in 1943. The name of the unknown man, which she had later learned through her own inquiry from a neighbor who recognized her description. She included this name in the letter. She included the address where this man worked. She had done her own investigation, quietly, in the 3 weeks she had, and she had gathered more than the police would gather in their official inquiry 28 years later. The final paragraph of the letter read, "I am mailing this to the police because I do not know what else to do with it. I am mailing it rather than delivering it because I am afraid that if I walk into a police station, the wrong person will see me, and whatever chance this information has of reaching someone honest will be lost. I know this letter may never arrive. I know it may arrive and mean nothing. But I am writing it because the alternative is to know what I know and say nothing, and I am not able to do that. My daughter's name is Ruth. She is 10 years old. If anything can be done, please do it for her." The letter was signed, Elanor Vos. October 17, 1943. The detective assigned to reopen the Vos case in 1971 was a man named Frank Cahill, 43 years old, 20 years on the force, the kind of detective who had survived long enough in a complicated city to know when something was going to be complicated. He read the letter twice before he pulled the original 1943 file, which had been archived and was retrieved from a city storage facility in 4 days. The original file was thin. 12 pages. The investigation in 1943 had lasted 6 weeks before being closed as a missing persons case with no evidence of foul play. The original detective on the 1943 case had interviewed Gerald Marsh. Marsh had stated that Elanor Vos had left his employ voluntarily in mid-October, that their professional relationship had been entirely appropriate, and that he had no knowledge of her whereabouts. The interview had lasted 40 minutes. There were no follow-up questions recorded. The file noted that Marsh was a cooperative witness. It did not note anything else about him. Cahill ran Gerald Marsh through current records. Marsh had died in 1959. Heart failure, at 60 years old, in his home in Chestnut Hill. He had been, by the time of his death, considerably wealthier than a tailor's income explained. He had served on 2 city advisory boards in the 1950s. He had been, in the small way that Philadelphia operated, a man with connections. The councilman named in Eleanor's letter had also died. 1965, the unknown man whose name Elanor had included had died in 1967. Cahill was working a dead case with 3 dead principals and a letter that was the only evidence. But the letter was specific. And the specificity was checkable. Elanor had written that on the night of September 28, 1943, an envelope containing $8,000 had changed hands in Marsh's back office in connection with a city contract. Cahill pulled city contract records for Philadelphia in 1943, which was not a simple process in 1971 and required 3 weeks of archive work. What he found was this: in October of 1943, the city of Philadelphia awarded a supply contract for municipal building materials worth approximately $400,000 to a company whose primary investor was, through 2 intermediate holding companies, the man whose name Elanor had written in her letter. The councilman named in her letter had been on the committee that approved the contract. $8,000 was approximately 2% of $400,000. A finder's fee, a thank you. A payment made in an office on Frankfort Avenue on the night of September 28, 1943, witnessed by a seamstress who should not have been there and who understood, with the particular intelligence of someone who had spent her whole life watching how things actually worked, exactly what she had seen. Cahill also found something else. In the city building inspection records for the winter of 1943, there was a report filed on November 4, 3 weeks after Elanor disappeared, noting that a section of floor in a commercial property on Frankfort Avenue had been recently repaired. The property address matched the address of Marsh's tailoring shop. The inspection had been routine. No one had questioned the repair. It was 1943. The city had other concerns. Cahill noted this in his file. He could not act on it directly. The building had been demolished in 1962 to make way for a parking structure. Whatever the repaired floor had concealed was gone. The case was closed again in 1973. Officially listed as homicide, perpetrator deceased, no further action possible. Elanor Vos was given a death certificate dated October 1943, 28 years after the fact. Her daughter Ruth, who was still living in 1971, who had spent 28 years not knowing what had happened to her mother, was told as much as Cahill felt he could tell her, which was that her mother had not disappeared voluntarily, that she had known what was coming, and that she had tried to do something about it. Ruth Vos, then 38 years old, living in New Jersey, read her mother's letter. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she asked the detective how the letter had survived for 28 years and why it had arrived when it did. Cahill told her he did not know. This is the part of the case that does not have a clean answer. And it is the part that, once you understand it, changes the nature of everything that came before. Elanor Vos mailed her letter on October 17, 1943. She would have walked to the post box on the corner of Belgrade and Lehigh, the one that was collected twice daily, the one she walked past every morning on the way to the trolley. She would have addressed the envelope to Philadelphia Police Department, 9th District, 325, Girard Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She would have affixed a 3-cent stamp. She would have dropped it in the box. That box was collected on the afternoon of October 17, according to postal records that Cahill was able to verify. The letters collected that day were processed at the Philadelphia Central Postal Facility on Market Street. From there they would have been sorted and delivered within 1 to 3 business days. Standard procedure. The 9th District was less than 2 miles from the collection point. The letter did not arrive. Cahill contacted the Postal Service during his investigation and requested any records that might explain a 28-year delay. The Postal Service, understandably, did not have records that granular from 1943. What they were able to tell him was this: occasionally, in the processing of large volumes of mail, letters were misrouted and ended up in the wrong sorting bin. When those bins were processed, sometimes at intervals of months or years depending on volume and staffing, the letters were rerouted to their correct destinations. It was rare. It happened. The official explanation for the Vos letter was that it had been misrouted in 1943 and had sat in a Philadelphia postal facility for 28 years before being correctly sorted and delivered in 1971. This explanation is possible. Postal historians have documented cases of severely delayed mail, though rarely of this duration. It is the explanation that appears in the official record. But Ruth Vos, who was not a sentimental woman and who had inherited her mother's particular kind of intelligence, asked Cahill a question that he wrote down in his notes and that has stayed in the record. She asked, "The letter arrived on March 14, 1971. My mother disappeared on October 19, 1943. Gerald Marsh died in 1959. The councilman died in 1965. The other man died in 1967. By March of 1971, every person who could have been harmed by that letter, every person who had reason to intercept it or suppress it or make it disappear, was dead." She asked, "Do you think that is a coincidence?" Cahill wrote in his notes that he did not answer the question. He wrote that he did not know how to answer it. He wrote that he had been a detective for 20 years and that he did not believe in coincidences as a professional matter, but that he also did not know what the alternative explanation was, and that not knowing made him uncomfortable in a way he was not going to put in an official report. The letter is currently held in the Philadelphia Police Department's Historical Evidence Archive. It has been examined twice by document specialists, once in 1971 and once in 1989. Both examinations confirmed that the paper and ink are consistent with materials available in 1943. Both examinations confirmed that the letter is authentic. Neither examination could explain where the letter had been for 28 years. The paper showed no significant moisture damage, no rodent damage, no light degradation. For a document allegedly sitting in a postal facility for 28 years, it was in extraordinary condition. The 1989 specialist noted in her report that the preservation was, and this is her word, unusual. She did not say impossible. She said unusual. And she did not speculate further. Elanor Vos was 31 years old in October of 1943. She had 7 years of formal education, no money, no connections, and no power in any of the ways that power is usually measured. She was a seamstress, a widow, a mother, a woman living alone in a working-class neighborhood of a city that did not think about women like her unless they caused a problem. She caused a problem. She saw something she was not supposed to see, and she understood it immediately, and she understood with equal clarity that understanding it was going to kill her. She had 6 weeks between the night of September 28, when she watched an envelope change hands in a back office on Frankfurt Avenue, and the night of October 19, when she disappeared. In those 6 weeks she identified the unknown man from a description. She researched his connections. She documented what she had seen with a specificity that held up, 28 years later, against city contract records. She wrote 3 pages of evidence in a clear hand without self-pity or hysteria, addressed it to the police she did not trust, and mailed it anyway. Because the alternative was to know the truth and say nothing. And she was not able to do that. She was right about everything. The contract was real. The payment was real. The connection was real. The floor repair at the shop was real. She had worked it out, alone, in 6 weeks, while being followed and threatened and slowly dismantled, and she had gotten every detail correct. She was also right that it would not save her. It did not. Elanor Vos was killed sometime around October 19, 1943, almost certainly by or on the order of Gerald Marsh, and whatever remains of her are somewhere beneath the Philadelphia that was built on top of the Philadelphia she knew. But the letter arrived, 28 years late, when every person who might have used it against her was dead. When the one man at the receiving desk was the one man who recognized her name. It arrived and it was read, and the truth of what Elanor Vos had seen and known and written down was entered into the official record of the city that had failed to protect her. Whether that is justice is a question I cannot answer. Whether the timing of that arrival is coincidence is a question I cannot answer. What I can tell you is what Elanor Vos herself would probably tell you, if she were here, if she were the woman her neighbors described and her own letter demonstrates. She would say that she wrote it down because someone needed to know. She would say that she mailed it because doing nothing was not an option. She would say that she did not know if it would work. She would say she did it anyway. And 28 years after she dropped it in a postbox on the corner of Belgrade and Lehigh, it worked. This has been 80s Horror Stories. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. Turn the notification on. These are the stories that the official record buries in a thin file in a storage facility, stories that survive because someone, somewhere, refused to let them disappear. Some letters take a long time to arrive. But they arrive. Stay with us. And stay awake.